In discussions about the American political system, if you were to take a good American history class or a good American politics class, one of the subjects that was probably going to come up is this debate between direct and indirect democracy, whether democracy in its purest sense is about direct popular control, where the public gets to vote on political outcomes directly, or if, in fact, the best way to think about it would be this Madisonian notion of republic, where the people pick leadership and the leadership ultimately make the decisions. The reality is that in any complex advanced democracy, in any complex or advanced state, you're going to have some level of indirect participation. For that reason, if we were to ask the question, what are the basic characteristics of democracy? One answer that's going to come up very frequently is this question of contestation. That is to say that if you want to have a real and effective advanced democracy, there's going to have to be some process by which political actors or political organizations compete against one another in order to contest political outcomes, in order to contest a political election. Contestation and the elections that ultimately result from contestation are important for a couple of different reasons. The first one is that by contesting an election, the actors who ultimately take control of the political system can argue that they have some level of consent from the government, some level of legitimacy from the government. I'm in power because the people voted. If the people voted in large enough numbers, if my margin of victory was of significant size, I can make the honest statement that I have the right to rule, or the will of the people on my side. Similarly, if we think about the definitions or the concepts of democracy, contestation also gives some measure of control to the public, whether that be direct control by saying I get to pick the people who are in charge, or maybe more of a backdoor control by saying that I have the ability to remove people from office if I disagree with their outcomes. The point is that the public still ultimately are the arbiters of political decisions and ultimately have final say. This question of contestation becomes important for other reasons, however, when we talk about types of democracy or levels of democracy. How many different types of elections are we going to have? When are these elections going to be held? Where are these elections going to be held? All of these come in or play into this question of contestation. Unified government versus checks and balances system, where the public get to vote for multiple actors who have power, and these actors ultimately have to compete with one another or contest with one another, even in the halls of government when the people aren't around. Another thing that you'll hear frequently when we discuss this notion of contestation is a debate about what the most appropriate way to structure or to think about these contests should be. On the one hand, the American model, and perhaps maybe even the British model, is to say that contestation is pluralistic in nature. The state is somehow a prize to be competed over. Political parties or political actors get involved in the political game, and they compete in the same way that you would expect to see sports teams to compete in a stadium. The organizations in the society, the civil society, then back one side or the other, and whoever wins ultimately has control or power. And the best way to control the victor is to have an opposition waiting in the wings to challenge them every time they make the decisions. This is the idea of pluralistic contestation. A second approach, and one that is perceived as being more democratic by some, is to think of a consociational process of contestation. In a consociational process, it's not so much that the opposing sides compete with one another, as much as it is that the purpose of an election is to figure out the relative strengths of opposing views in the public sphere. That way, when decisions are made, all of the actors can sit at the table, and we can hopefully have an outcome that reflects the balance of power across society, and not simply make the assumption that to the victor goes all of the spoils.